Good afternoon, everybody.
Or good morning or good evening, depending upon where you are. We're glad to see you. I'm Robin,
And I am Gil.
and we are here rocking the love.
Absolutely.
So glad that you joined us. Um, Want to remind you to please put in the chat where you're from. And if you're out there listening, just let us know so we can say hello and not talk about you behind your back.
It's always better in front.
It's true. It's not true.
And please feel free to go to our YouTube page and subscribe so that you can get notified when these things are happening and reminded.
Yeah, make sure to like. And I wanted to start out with, I want to do a little catch up because I know we were not in catch up. I know how your mind thinks, and I wanted to avert the joke.
Is there a burger?
I wanted to do a little catch up, and I wanted to check in with people out there as well, and just ask. I know, like over the past few weeks, we've given little tidbits or assignments, or just make sure where you're rocking the love, or I don't know what else do we offer.
Oh, just ask people to think about some of the things we talked. We talked about intentional partnership. We talked about balanced partnership. We've talked about ourselves.
So I just feel free to put in the comments if you've anything has come up with that, if you've noticed anything different. We had someone tell us the other night that it made them stop and think about what they were doing in a certain situation. So we'd love to hear your experiences and if you're getting any value from that. And also always we want to know your thoughts, your ideas. If you have anything you want to see as a show, feel free to email us at info@rockinthelove.com, and that'll go up throughout the show, so you'll have a chance to write it down. Don't panic. Don't run for a pen. Yeah.
And we do the show. We have a lot of fun, and we get a chance to actually spend some time talking together, which is fun. But we do it for you, and we do it hopefully so that somebody is able to get a nugget somewhere. So we're really happy when we get input back and we find out what's going on, and we're able to talk with people. Last time we got a chance to literally have a conversation back and forth with a couple people, and that's really fun. That makes it all worthwhile. So we appreciate that.
And I also wanted to say we try to not use a lot of jargon and things that people might not always understand. And I realized as I happened to watch part of our show last week that we use the term holding the space. And I thought, I know what it means if you're standing in line for concert tickets, but I don't know if you say in your marriage I was holding the space. It's like most people think once they're in partnership, it's a done deal. Mate, check.
Isn't that what you have to do in the grocery store to keep 6 feet apart? You got to hold the space.
That's a whole different. That's an updated version. But I just wanted to speak to that a little, because when I said I was holding the space, or that in partnership we hold the space, what I mean is there's a lot of times, for example, that I can see my friends or I can see Gil, and I know like what an amazing speaker he is, or how smart he is, or something like that. And he may have a bad day and it may not appear that way to him. But I'm always anchoring and just knowing and holding that. It's kind of like being in a prayerful yet knowing state, right? In some ways, because if I'm holding that for you, if my thoughts are prayers, which we say they are, another show, stay tuned. But if my thoughts are prayers, then I'm always praying. And so if I'm knowing that you are amazing and talented and all of those things, then that's what I'm doing, is I'm holding that space, right?
You're holding okay. So you're what I interpret it as is we hold a container. We it's like a big hug So when someone's like not feeling where they need to be or not seeing themselves as we know they are, I mean, with the perfection that they are, then we kind of give them this big virtual hug around them and sort of hold them in a space so that they don't get out too far. They don't lose themselves in the sense of not being enough or having blown it or whatever the situation is. Does that kind of describe it?
That kind of describes it. Anyway, I'm probably preaching to the choir. You probably all know that, but somewhere down the line, someone's going to turn this tape on and they're not going to know. And they're going to be glad we said something. Right?
They'll be glad we said something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Laura. Welcome, John. Welcome, TC. So good to see you. So good to see all of you. Anyway, okay, I know you're all here for our guest. I know that. You're not fooling me. Okay.
Do we have a guest today? Oh, I'm sorry.
We're not getting to her yet because I have more to say. I want to go to the quote I left you with last week. So last week was about intentional relationship. And we spent a lot of time talking about how to do that, how to have that, how to create that kind of
balanced partnership.
Partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the show, I left you with another quote, which was, if you want to do great things, striving for balance is a losing game.
Okay.
So tell me about that. What do you think of that?
And when you said it last week, I almost fell out of my chair because I thought, wait, that's just the opposite of everything we said all day, right? But it reminds me of a story, not a story, but just something one time, and I'm sure it's been said by others, but we were at Agape, and I heard Reverend Michael say, every time you take a step, you're falling forward. That you're totally out of balance when you walk. Because that's how it works. And so if I can hear that from that context of, in order to keep moving, we have to allow ourselves to feel and to trust that there's pure points in the step where we're out of balance and points where we're back in balance, but that it's all a continual thing. Hey, howdy, Wayne from Calgary. Welcome.
Yeah. And I interpret it to mean that if we don't take a step, I mean, going forward means taking a step.
Right.
So we're always going to be out of balance.
If we're so tied to our balance, quote unquote, if we're so tied to keeping things static so that we don't feel like we could fall over, we don't feel like we could fail, we don't feel like we could.
Well, we don't feel like we're moving.
Then we're not moving. That's right.
I mean,
that's right.
If, when we don't want to do something and we're scared and whatever, there's got to be movement in order for us to leap into the next phase of it, right?
A nice static thing is a flat line, otherwise known as your heart doesn't work. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in our bodies and in our lives which I think demonstrate the fact that there's flow. There's up and down and movement, and movement is what keeps us going. So there you go. That's what I think about that. Anybody have any other thoughts that we're missing around that?
Wayne says one step and the next gets you where you're going. Absolutely. And so we're never in balance, almost, in theory, in the way we like to think of it as being like, I mean, always being in that Zen position, nothing, calm.
The scales of justice. And we have the scales and they're perfectly balanced, right? But they're not really, even in that situation. Every time it's skewed a little bit, but overall, there's balance. That's what I would say.
And the award-winning Laura Topper says, so true. I slipped over today. Right? And so it's not, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's just movement. And for those of you that don't know, Laura Topper has a fantastic show on Mondays on New Thought Media Network called The Cosmic Prayer. Last week she had the fabulous Reverend Joan Stedman on, and she has wonderful, wonderful guests all the time. So make sure and look for that.
And as far as I know, Laura Topper does some other shows too. So just take a look at New Thought Media Network and see what you find. John, thanks so much for joining us. It's so great to see you. And he talks about staying static to avoid failure or rejection. And that's exactly what we do, right? I do it. John does it. I don't think Robin does it, but most of us do that from time to time.
Okay, apparently he's got a lot of energy today, folks. So buckle in because this is a whole new Gil. Okay.
Just got back from 10 miles of bike riding. I'm feeling good.
Show off. Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to say, I truly believe that anything we say, you should never believe it. Everybody should do their own research and their own thinking, and there's always another side to it. So I just wanted to bring up that point because, you know, we get into that, oh, I've got to have balance, I've got to have this. And the other side is we've got to keep moving. We've got to keep moving and striving for things we want. And, you know, so I just wanted to bring that up.
Therein lies the balance or the lack of balance, depending on how you look at it.
See, folks, this is the beauty of being a metaphysician. You can make things up about anything and make them make sense in your world. So I'm not going to keep you on that track because that's where you would tune into another show on this network with Rev Robert and Rev LZ.
That's true.
Called Ministers Talking Shit. And they're all good. There's such a plethora of shows here that can keep you busy. So make sure to check that out. So before we get to our guest.
Should we talk about our topic? Or you have something else?
No, go ahead.
Did you have something else?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So our topic for today, this is exciting. This is the month of love. And our topic today is good grief. Now, if you're like me, you think of Charlie Brown when you hear that. Maybe. But this is actually a great topic. I don't think we talk about grief enough. I don't think we acknowledge grief in our lives enough. I don't think we realize how powerful it can be. And today we have somebody that's going to help us really examine that and be with that.
Absolutely. I will tell you, when I was doing some research on grief, because I like to look things up before the shows, I was amazed really at how much I think is unsaid about grief. You know, even on Google, I feel like, yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and we're very excited to have our guest coming up next, who is also starting a show on New Thought Media Network, and that will be happening next Monday, called Your Grief Doula. And she'll tell you more about that. We'll get to more about that. But right now, we're going to take a break, and we'll come right back on New Thought Media Network.
Or we'll stay right here. afternoon, everybody. You are live with Gil and
Robin.
On Rockin' the Love. Today's theme, and we're very excited about it, is good grief. And to that end, it is my honor to begin introducing our guest. I'd like to let you know that who's coming on next is Bonnie Gonzalez. She is a registered nurse. Hi, Bonnie. She's a religious science practitioner. She's a professional life coach. She's a licensed
soul collage
facilitator. I couldn't read it. Sorry. And a doula for grief. Bonnie is a former hospice and palliative care nurse. So if you need to add some more credentials to that, I don't think you need to. Robin?
Her new show, Your Doula for Grief, premieres next Monday, February 14th on New Thought Media Network. And it's about demystifying grief, bringing grief out of the shadows of life and illuminating its gifts and a state of grace. Bonnie is amazing and has spent her whole life traveling. She was started in South Carolina, moved to Washington, D.C., lived in the Bay Area for 30 years. And now the exciting part of her life, she is, right now she is living in Mexico, but they moved, like, I can't believe it's been 2 years already. Mm-hmm. That is wild. She moved 2 years, and their home base is in Ireland, in Drogheda, Ireland, and she's amazing. So she is a global citizen and an amazing practitioner and friend. And so we're just honored to have her, because otherwise we'll just talk about her like she's not here for the next 40 minutes.
We can't let her talk yet because we just need to know that she's such a wonderful person. And we love her. So thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you. Oh my, I am just sitting here in my chair. That music during the break, I was just like, what's that old term? I was just rocking out. Oh, that feels good. What a good space to move in to talk about grief. And I just want to say, I don't know, do they still use that word homies? I just saw names come up of people that I know. So I wanted to say, hey to my homies. I may be dating myself, but I saw John's name and Laura and TC and anybody else that's out there that I know, hey to you. And just thank you for joining the show today. I just want to say thank you for taking the time for yourself to say, yes, I want to know more about grief. I want to know more about grief. It is definitely one of those subjects that is so, I would almost say, taboo in our culture, because the whole thing, this is my interpretation, so anything I say is Bonnie, okay? The whole interpretation for me, the reason that we find it so hard to discuss grief, because grief is usually associated with death. And what a culture. We don't even, oh my goodness, can't even acknowledge, death. Some people are absolutely, I've had clients that are absolutely terrified of death. Mm-hmm. And I hope this isn't too much sharing, but I was recently sick with COVID, and somebody asked me, they said, oh, aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid that you're going to die? And I said, well, not really. And I said, and if I were afraid of dying, I better get in touch with it, because I am going to die one day. It's not today, but yeah. So I feel that for me, with working with clients, that has been the underpinning, that when we think of death, when we think of grief, we automatically go to death. But I want to shed the light that grief is just caused by loss. A loss, of course, the big mother of loss is death. But, hopes and dreams. Maybe you've gotten to a certain stage of your life and you thought you were going to be president, and you're not. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen. That can that can put you in a state of grief. You know, animals' death and die puts us in that state of grief. A lost friendship, relationships that end, be it divorce or just moving away.
So Bonnie, there's all
Yes,
these.
I'm sorry. Yes.
What would you say is one of the most popular? Not really what I mean, but one of the things people most often come with, maybe in terms of unresolved grief,
Mm-hmm.
things that they may not have
Mm-hmm.
realized they were grieving about or whatever. What do you see in working with people is the most pressing thing there?
I was I'm trying to relate it back to just one issue. But what I find, and then we'll get to the cause, but what I find is the biggest issue is a loss of connection. A loss of connection. Clients that I have worked with just really feel that, number one, there's not enough support, or in that state of, I can't really share this with anybody. Nobody would understand. So it could have been a death, say, of your mother that happened 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if you had gone to seek support, it would have been there. But 20 years later, the first thing people say is, aren't you over that yet? Haven't you moved on from that? So I would say whatever has caused your disconnect, whatever has caused you to feel not connected, and that can be through different types of loss. I hope that makes a little sense or answers your question.
And don't we also find that, for me anyway, I like to think I'm really special.
You are, Gil. Robin doesn't tell you that every day.
Yeah, really special. And so when things happen in my life, they do not happen to other people. They only happen to me. And so I couldn't talk to anyone about it because they wouldn't possibly understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And isn't that part of breaking down that thing that says, hey, you're not that special. You're human. This is part of life.
And I was going to say, and in addition to that, I find really big also, just that nobody else is going through this. But in addition, it's like, I just don't want to burden people. I'm somewhat embarrassed that I have to confess that I have this issue. Being seen as a failure, I was just going to say, we talked a little bit yesterday, Gail, Robin, and myself, and it just allowed me to start really thinking about loss, the word loss, before we move into grief. But if I thought about an incident where we're already taught, like, if you win a game, it's a high five, everybody, fist bump or belly bump. But if you lose, it's like, don't be a sore loser. Show good sportsmanship, even if you lost. Go and congratulate. It's like, why can't you say, "Wow, you lost. That really sucks. That must be hard for you. That must be hard for you to have lost." So, if we're thinking of it, even in just social settings, in that way, that we can't even put an emotion to loss, then how are you going to do that when you have life events that are lost and leading to grief? And
there's a lot. There's a couple of things, and I want to acknowledge Wayne's comment. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But one thing was we don't talk a lot about grief in Centers for Spiritual Living or New Thought centers. And I would say we don't talk a lot about grief in our culture. Mm-hmm. I know other cultures tend to celebrate life a lot more and do more of a grieving process. And I think that, some of it makes it so taboo here. We have to like buck up and get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And, It's okay. It'll get better. And especially again in New Thought, we're so, oh, it's eternal life. We're always together. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're talking about the loss of somebody, yes, you're always together, but it's not the same thing, so it's an interesting thing to acknowledge it that way. And
Mm.
but Wayne asks, how do I support grief?
Wow, Wayne, I love you for asking the question. I saw that in the comment box, and it's, oh, that is just. I want you to just imagine anytime that you maybe I'll use myself as an example. This weekend here in Mexico, I met someone. She was the first person we met. I met her on the street, and she took us under her wing and just said, I want you to come over for Thanksgiving dinner. I want to present you to the community. And it's like, wow, how wonderful. So she just became very dear to us. And I saw her briefly on Saturday. And then when I got home, I got it was like a group text saying that her grandson had died. And her grandson had just gotten a scholarship to Notre Dame. Really life, just bigger than life adventures ahead of him. And the first thing I did immediately was I tried to call. And I knew that she was probably in that state of, after a big shock like that, you're just in shock and probably numb. But every day I have just sent a text to say, either I know that, first of all, I just said, my heart is broken for you. The next text, I am just here. I am sending you prayers. And not the, call me if you need something. The last text I sent, I just said, I will keep checking in to see if you need anything. So that's how you can support grief. I think, Wayne, what happens is that we want to fix people's grief. We want to fix them. Like, I want her heart not to be broken that her grandson is suddenly gone. I want to see that happy face on the street when I walk down the street. But knowing that this is a state of grief and you can't fix it. And that's why I say, being a doula for grief, let me walk with you. Let me walk with you as you navigate this really difficult time. And, hold the light so that you can see the path when you're feeling like you're so totally lost and confused. And so I
was just going to say, if I'm hearing you right, you're really saying we honor grief at some level. We honor other people's process. And so you could have run over to her house and you could have said, oh, you must hug me, I must hug you,
mm-hmm.
whatever, those kinds of things, which are sort of that fix it process. And that may not have been what she needed, and so you gave her the space to be in grief, mm-hmm. and then time honored the grief. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes. And I wanted to say two things to that when you said that. That made me, okay, yes, that desire to fix, to make them feel better, to put a balm on the wound, that is what stops people from going. That's what stops them from calling. It's like, I don't want to trigger her. I don't want to upset her even more by bringing it up. It's like, this is grief. This is the face of grief. And yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, I'm not going to lie and say, oh, yeah, you'll feel bad for a week. And then, no, it is. But I love that, Gil, that you said it's honoring the grief, because there is so much going on when we're in a state of grief. It's like that caterpillar in the chrysalis. I call it the holy chrysalis of grief. There's a lot of muck and ugliness and pain that's going on in there, but there is healing going on in there too. And it's the moving through it. And everybody that I have coached, has said, on the other side, they did not know that this person that has persevered and the resilience even existed. And not that, yeah, I want to go through that again so I can have X, Y, and Z, but just to know that it is a process that you can move through. So many of my clients are afraid that they will not survive it, that grief will just suck them down like quicksand, and that's it. Your life is over. But yes,
I think it's so important what's being said in the chat. Michelle said, you can be support by just showing up, and Wayne said, open-hearted, being an open-hearted channel. And Laura said, why are we so fearful of feelings? And when I put all three of those together, I mean, it really speaks to what happens within me at times, like I try to be an open channel. I try to, feel, I try to figure out how to support. And then I'm like afraid. I'm afraid that I'm going to do something wrong for the person that's in grief, that I'm not going to show up the right way, or that I'm going to push too far, or that I don't, somebody else must know how to hold their hand better than I do, And I mean, I think it's just so interesting, because we're just not, I'll speak for myself, but as a society, I don't think we're trained in that way to deal with the real.
Robin, I hear that. There's 2 points I'll speak to, but one thing I wanted to say is that I do remember a time where we were in touch with grief. I remember being very young, which was just last week. No, but some time ago. I just remember when I was a little girl, if someone died, there was a wreath placed on your front door so that people would know that that household has suffered a loss. There is something that has gone on. People would see the wreath. They would either bring food by or flowers or just drop in to see how they were doing. And I remember that. And I was raised in the Baptist church. And so the men, if it was their wife the men would just have a black, what do you call that? A black stripe or a black band, a black band on their arm. And if you were a woman, you would wear a flower on your dress or lapel part of the dress to signify that you had had a loss, and it would usually be a white flower. And I remember that. And it's like, when did that go by the wayside?
Was that when you were in South Carolina?
That was in South Carolina and in DC, because I left South Carolina when I was like 9. The South is another animal, and that's another show. Grieving in the South, okay? We'll just put that on the back burner. And I must say too, and I'll just keep it with the eye, that idea is to try to move through that really quickly. I know when my mom died, if I could have cremated her the next day, I would have, just so I could get through that. It was like, how soon can we do it? But anyway, that was a grief mind, and there is something called grief brain that I'll discuss on my show. I'll devote like an entire show to the brain on grief. We'll put it that way, that there's just thinking that goes on that is totally grief thinking.
Right.
Yeah. And Robin, back to your point of wanting to, afraid that you're going to mess it up if you go and talk to somebody. Every client that I have had, anybody that has come to them, they didn't feel that that person messed it up. Now, there's some things we'll talk about later that maybe it's not the best thing to say to someone in grief. But most of my clients have said that they were more heartbroken by their friends disappearing.
Mhm.
They were more heartbroken by their friends disappearing. And a couple of these people that I knew, I went back and said, blah, 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 said X, Y, and Z, that you disappeared. 9 times out of 10, the first thing they said was, I just didn't know what to say. I just didn't want to screw it up. And so that is the number one, the disappearing
Right.
of friends.
And TC made a comment that I think is really interesting and fits in here, that also her desire when she became a widow, I wish that there was the year of mourning, that still existed. And in some ways, she goes on to say that so other people would know, and I wouldn't have to keep telling them what's going on. And I'm wondering, if that, so we respond to the fear that we're going to step in to somebody's space like that. We're going to say the wrong thing, and then they're going to feel bad. But the reality is, if we're going through grief, we're going to feel bad at different points, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we hang on to it, we can't move forward. At least that's my, and I want to bring in the conversation that it's a loss of connection. It's not simply about death. And I know you said that, but I just want to reiterate that. My worst grief has had nothing to do with death.
Right. And I want to get to that after we do a commercial.
Oh, a commercial.
As we go to, or a break, whatever we do. But as we go to that, I wanted to just leave you with a quote that I found that said, "Grief never ends, but it changes. It is a passage, not a place to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love."
Mm. Yes. So if you have to go to break, I'll hold my breath. I'll take a breath and breathe and wait to come back on the other side.
Oh, all right. Come back on the other side. Youth Thought Media Network.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. And a special thanks to Hefferland Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajay, thank you for your very generous donation. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.
Hello. Welcome back. We are here on New Thought Media Network with our guest, Bonnie Morgan Gonzalez.
She is your grief doula, and we are happy to have her on Rockin' the Love today. And our topic today is good grief. And Robin, before the break, go ahead.
Well, I read a quote that Bonnie was going to speak to. So speak.
And my maiden name was Speaks, so Bonnie speaks.
That's funny.
Oh, me. No, I love the quote. It is about moving through. It is not a place that you will stay. It is not a place that you will take up residency. Know that you can move through. And if I had to just leave with one suggestion about moving through, it's just don't do it alone. Just don't do it alone. It is mandatory. It is vital that you have someone that can witness your story. And it's not like just story, but witness what you are experiencing and knowing that that is how we move through grief.
And I want to share what Kent and Linda are out in the audience. Hello, Kent and Linda.
Oh, hey, homies.
Linda said she likes the Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva, where friends come by the home for 7 days and they gather and it's helpful. But when Shiva ends, that can also be a big letdown because you're left alone to feel the grief. And yeah, I think it is. I think that's such a nice extended period where everybody feels like it's okay and can support, can just show up and support or bring food or do whatever they're doing to make that okay. But I don't want to stay stuck on this grief. I want to move on because this is the grief you find on the internet. Like if you look up grief, everything's about death and dying and all of that. And I think what's so important in our relationships, especially, is the little griefs we bring in. We bring in like, go ahead, Gil. You were going to share your.
I was thinking of big griefs, but
okay, little griefs. Well, they're all big. I mean, none of them are little. But I mean, I had grief. When I moved from Southern California to Northern California. Not so much about that, but I had grief about leaving my agape choir family, the choir that I sang in. And every time I'd walk into anywhere that was playing any kind of music that was similar, I'd start crying, just the grief around when somebody else moves out of town or when, or I'm an actor. And when I did a show, the grief when the show ends of being with your show family. And just all the small things, again, not necessarily small. I'm saying small in my world, in the big scheme of life.
But there are ways where we lose connection.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't hear that, Gil. Say that again.
Places where we lose connection or the connection at least shifts, if nothing else.
I love both your points. I love what Robin's talking about moving. I myself have had that big mother of not leaving just my community, my neighborhood, my state, but leaving my country where I know how things operate. I know who I am in that place. Moving to another place, who I am I. So there was that loss of that Bonnie that had her place. And can I say this? I'll say it. There was many of nights that I cried myself to sleep. I cried myself to sleep, and tears, that whole business of water being cleansing, I would wake up and feel much better. Or I would wake up and still drag around. But it's that acceptance of that. And like we talked about, knowing that it's a state that I'm moving through, that it's just temporary. I'm like you, Robin, I hate those cliches and things like that. But the expression that it came to pass, it came to pass.
Mm.
So knowing that allows me to move through whatever little death or little loss that I'm feeling.
And does it allow us to grow into our ability to walk through those changes and to be grateful for the connections we have in the moment? I mean, it does for me.
What I would attribute, or how I would frame that, is that it builds that sense of resilience. That, man, I made it through that. Yeah, I can make it through anything. Or I made it through that. It was rough, but I came out. It gives that's what I refer to it as, a sense of resilience.
So I like the cracks and crevices things. I like the undercover grief.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Uncover some grief, Robin. Go ahead.
I have a client who was talking to me yesterday about she was having a hard time paying her bills, and she was going into debt due to medical issues, blah blah blah, and she got money from somewhere, and now her bills are paid, and she doesn't know what to do with the rest of her money. And literally, we grieve the loss of old patterns, even though they may be something we want, right? I mean, so I may want to pay my bills, but then all of a sudden my bills are paid, and I don't get to run that story anymore. I don't get to keep talking about that pattern.
Mm-hmm. Or would you say that there's a sense of addiction to a certain emotion, a certain way of being, that it's just, and I don't use the word habit, because habit, it's like you can break a habit, but an addiction goes a little bit deeper because it's serving some underlying need, that it's serving some underlying need by having that. That's why I call it an addiction. And usually, and I don't want to, just put things in a box and tied up. Maybe I can say 99.9% of the time it has to do with self-worth, self-value.
I was going to say, what struck me in that story, or that kind of story, is it goes back to what you said about moving to Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who I am in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Gil, I love that. That's why you're the Reverend. Okay.
That's what I hold the space for. If we
go
back to the top of the show,
that's what you're holding the space for. Well, New Thought Media Network is holding the space for all of us to hold the space.
That's so true.
So yeah, so I'm wondering if anyone out there has questions, please put them in the chat.
Or other kinds of grief, or that kind of thing that we could just touch on in the next few minutes.
Yeah. I wanted to just kind of bring up some emotions that come around grief that have been kind of enlightening in my practice with clients. Those people that are in joy. Those people that are in joy, and they feel guilty about being in joy over a loss. So I was going to say that, I guess what I want to say is embrace what comes up, and don't be in guilt around feeling joy, even joy that that you lost your job. One person was in total joy. They had started a company, and it went bankrupt. It drained the family of their money. But he was in a state of, it started out, he came because he was just, he felt like something was wrong with him. Something was wrong. because I'm feeling joy. But it was just around the fact that it had been so stressful to maintain that business and that it took everything. He and his wife were just arguing all the time. Now it was gone. It was completely gone. He felt freed up. He felt like he was really being given another opportunity. And the truth of it was that he never really even liked the business anyway. That was that was the truth. But he was one of those people that came, around grief of losing the business, or that's why the wife felt that they should be there. But he was just simply in joy. So don't be ashamed if that is one of the emotions. I mean, grief just brings up all kinds of emotions, but joy is one that most people have a harder time dealing with than if they're sad.
Right.
Hmm.
Because we're supposed to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That just brings me up. I'm having a flight of ideas here, but when we talk about sadness, how people don't want to move through sadness. Did anyone see that movie Inside Out? It's an animated, and they showed how vital sadness was to saving this little girl's life.
Right.
And I just say, if you want to have a different, fun perspective, a fun way of learning to embrace sadness, watch that movie. That's
Well, and I think that speaks to Wayne's question, which
I
was,
did see this question. Yeah.
what if grief has no end? And in some ways, like that movie, gave the voice to all of our emotions, and how important it is to
Honor each one.
own them and bring them all into play. And sometimes, I mean, I don't know what your answer to what if grief has no end is, but I mean, sometimes we have to, I don't know, pull our heads out. I just have a vision of someone like trying to get out of quicksand kind of thing. But you've got to fake it, get out, force it. I don't know.
Fake it till you become it. Remember that phrase? Yeah. Fake it till you become it. I have this quote, I guess it talks about sitting with our sadness, okay? And we can say grief, I'll just use the word sadness, takes the courage to believe that we can bear the pain, and we will come out on the other side. And we will come out on the other side. Feeling like it won't end. I had a period of dark night of the soul last year that lasted forever, and I was like Wayne was just saying, feeling like it would last forever. And my way of moving through that was to say, if this shouldn't end, what can I do? What can I do? If this won't end, these feelings won't go away, what will I do? And I did reach out for help. So that's where reaching out for help, when you're feeling just totally that you can't see a way out, that you can't see the way out. We sometimes need somebody to just hold the light so that we can find the way out, so that we can find it.
I have to say that I think that brings us right back to the beginning, and unfortunately we don't have more time, so you're going to have to come back. But I think Wayne, when you can't, what we're all saying or thinking is, when one of us can't do it alone, that's when you really call on your team, because they can hold the space.
Yes.
They can hold the space. They can lift you up. They can be there to shine a light, and there are people out there that will do that, obviously, that love you and care about you. And there are other people that will do it because that's what they do.
Yeah. And I was going to say, in being a doula for grief, helping you build that team, because so many people feel that they don't have a team. They don't know how to get a team. So that's when it's really great to just reach out. And there's, groups, there's online, there's so many things. Oh, I saw Gil put his hand over his heart. So I was just going to say, let's all just put our hands on our own heart and just send our own hearts, light and love, and knowing that we have support. We have support and being in gratitude for each other.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
all that you've shared. And I think Laura gives us a bit of encouragement and just a thought to take away today. She says, I surrendered to a deep conversation with grief, and it opened my heart to joy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great visual for me, at least, or
Mm-hmm.
a thought. So I appreciate that. So we are looking forward to.
Thank you, Lord.
And
Robin,
also,
one more thing.
it also gives us a possible exercise to do with ourselves, to really have a conversation with our grief, whether we journal, whether we sit and meditate,
Mm-hmm.
and really just get real about that. So yes, as Gil was saying, I am so honored to be on New Thought Media Network. If you were and if you are inspired, there's such good work going on here. Please make a donation to the station. If you are looking for more inspiration, we've had Laura Topper out in the audience with the Cosmic Prayer Show. We have our latest show, Doula for Grief, starting next Monday the 14th with Bonnie Gonzalez. And there's so much more happening here. We have our fabulous producer, big heart to our producer out there with his show Fireside Chat on Friday nights. You could spend every day of the week with us. And if we're not talking, you can flip the station and listen to music. So do that. I want to leave you with a quote before we go, and it's not going to turn the whole show around this week, by Kahlil Gibran, and it is, when you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that truly you are weeping for that which has been your delight. So appreciate it all and rock the love, y'all out there in the world.
And we'll see you next Wednesday, 12 noon Pacific, 1 o'clock Mountain Time. And
right
I don't
here
know what time it is in Ireland, but it'll be another time there.
On New Thought Media Network.
Join us.